So it's been 20 years since the first Ben 10 fight scenes in 2005, and it's been 4 years since we last saw Ben 10 in animated form itself. However, since the very important year of 2005, we have had many animated shows come and go, which showed us a rapid evolution of the animated fight scene. Let me give you an example. In 2005, where we still had Justice League episodes airing, we got a banger episode which is the Doomsday Sanction. Besides having a freaking amazing name, this gave us the second battle of Superman versus Doomsday in the DCAU. This had high stakes, as the battle had many moving parts, with an epic island leveling fight taking place between two juggernauts. Batman was on the sidelines trying to stop a missile from taking out Clark Kent. The show itself marked a huge shift in the execution of their animation as they moved on from cell drawing animation to more modernly used digital styles. This was great for the representation of both Superman and Doomsday slugging it out in the lava and showing the near indestructible nature of both of these titans. But 20 years later, in a similar depiction of a Superman versus Earth's greatest threat in the show Invincible, we get to see how fight scenes have changed. Stuff like the choreography, the large scale attacks are still huge, and the perspective shots have probably been even more perfected. The power of those big planet busters are even more exaggerated, and animation mediums are more blended. Where Justice League would primarily rely on digitally animated scenes and raw hand-drawn skill, Invincible shifts into incorporating both CGI cityscapes and effects with more stark and dynamic lighting and a lot more blood. But today we're going to track some of the most epic animated fight scenes in the last 2 decades, how they began to change as time passed, and what we can appreciate about a good fight scene.
Dot hack sign is on now. Then it's time for Cyborg 009. This is Cartoon Network.
2005 was quite a year for animation, because we got a lot of cult classics from that era, honestly. From Ben 10 to Avatar and Everybody Hates Chris. You guys watched Everybody Hates Chris, right? Yeah, I mean, it's not a cartoon, so probably not. You already know we got a lot of fight scenes in each of those shows that pretty much got played on repeat on our DVD players and in YouTube montages in internet cafes. I can talk for myself because that was something I really lived on in my childhood. It was pretty hard for me to pick the ones that stood out from the era of 2005, but we had to go with Peak from Ben 10 Classic, starting with an unconventional one, which is where Ripjaws takes on an armada of squid robots. This scene is a rare moment to show off the very specialized aliens' power and abilities underwater, as Ripjaws tears through these metallic glass humpers like they are wet paper. It is a memorable moment for me as well, because it was a race against time in 2 aspects. You see, the submarine that Ben, Gwen, and his cousin were in was being attacked and critically damaged, which would surely drown or crush a trio of 10-year-olds within a short span of time. Along with that, Ben himself is running on the clock with this transformation, as he has to stop the army of robot squids, remove them from the submarine, and do that all before he himself reverts into human form. It is truly a race against time, and it raises the stakes as the lives of these kids hangs in the balance. The show had been done in a primarily hand-drawn style with digital coloring, which gave a pretty unique aesthetic that made the fight and the entire show in general stand out. Along with these inverted impact frames that kinda showed up the power of Ripjaws' attacks. It was really cool. Another fight from the show that shows off the beauty of the hand-drawn aesthetic is Ben versus Kevin 11 in the episode Kevin 11. This is a significantly shorter fight, but it is symbolic as it is a clash of ideals. This is where Ben's decision to use his power for good and altruism is challenged by Kevin's greed for power and use for selfish reasons. Just like the previous Ripjaws fight, it is a battle against the clock, but in this case it wasn't as one-sided as Ripjaws was when he was taking out the glass humpers. Ben ends up in a really unique situation where he's being out-muscled in the most embarrassing way. Using the muscle guy, I mean, it's pretty sad, man. But he ends up clutching up and beating Kevin in the last 2 seconds with a beautifully animated, quick-paced scene, which isn't something we see from Ben 10 very often. Those sharp, decisive moments can really add to a fight scene and make it iconic though, because clutching up is always amazing. The aesthetic of the hand-drawn pieces evolved into 2006, where we get the original Teen Titans show. This is one of the most iconic things to come out in that year, as it capitalizes on the build-up of superhero entertainment and media like Justice League, Static Shock, and then the Teen Titans just kind of slotted in pretty naturally, gave their own fresh take and natural progression on it. Many an iconic fight came from the show, but one of the most important ones that came from it was from one of the Robin versus Slane battles. It's pretty hard to pick any of those, but the one that really stood out to me came from the episode Haunted, where he fights a non-existent Slade. This kind of fight is more than just raw action, but it was a psychological attack that really manifested on Robin in the darkness. It was a one-sided beatdown that represented the stress and trauma that the boy Wonder had gone through, and it is a borderline schizophrenic encounter for him that had the entire team fearing for Robin's life and sanity. The animation is still hand-drawn, and believe it or not, you can see the crisp digital elements in the colors and the background. The art style was headed by Derek J. Wyatt, who didn't just leave his imprint on Teen Titans, but he left it on Transformers and also a Ben 10 series that would come out further down in the future. The flickering on and off of the light showing Slade appearing and disappearing was a sick element to add to this combat. It definitely had me as a fan in a chokehold while watching this on TV, because I was screaming, telling Robin, he's not real, he's not real. It was so good. Many regard this to be one of the best episodes of the original Teen Titans show, as the battle captivates us with fear, suspense, and it just ages well when you understand how trauma can really cook you, even after you have overcome the thing that has traumatized you, because at this point Slade was already dead, so he was fighting a ghost. It was really deep. And May 13th though, the same year, Justice League Unlimited aired the finale of its show, with a huge battle of the ages as Darkseid, who is now fused with Brainiac, invades Earth, giving us a 2-episode special for the ages. This fight was a large-scale invasion which had both the Justice League and the villains team up to defend Earth. However, the major fight only happens when Lex Luthor, Batman, and Superman take on Darkseid. This fight gives us not only one of the coolest Darkseid designs of all time, but it also shows off the various skills and abilities that both of the non-powered beings have, showing off what Batman and Lex Luthor really have going for them. And it also gives us some of the absolute best Superman moments in the DCAU, let alone probably all of fiction. Plus we get a lot of really iconic quotes from this fight as well.
What we have here is a rare opportunity for me to cut loose and show you just how powerful I really am.
Oh my god! Wow!
Come on man, when you hear that, doesn't it give you chills? It's awesome. I remember watching that for the first time and then rewatching it as an adult. It's amazing. These killer lines sell the fight more than the battle itself in my opinion. So much so that the battle isn't even won by brute strength of Superman or some intellectual strategy of Batman. But this victory is taken by the wit of Lex Luthor and his backdoor plan of giving Darkseid what he truly wants in order to end the chaos. It is pretty well animated, period. I was going to say it's pretty well animated for its time, but it's just pretty well animated, period. However, one of the greater spectacles really comes from the story and the context of this fight. It raises the stakes to the ultimate level of probably not just Earth being at risk, but maybe even the universe. And it does something so amazing that we don't get to see very often, where heroes actually don't really win. It's a very deep fight that really did stand the test of time. However, in 2007, we get a pretty different approach as 3D animation starts to really become increasingly popular, and we get to see a pretty well done Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film that starts to push the limits of what the medium can do. The fight between Raphael and Leonardo in the early moments of the film is a very similar battle to what we get from Kevin and Ben Tennyson. A real clash of ideas, but with a more pure side to it than a good versus evil kind of thing. This kind of face-off of anger and selfishness versus altruism and self-sacrifice is pretty good. Even though both of them have a certain degree of cockiness to themselves, it still remains as a true clash of opposites in a sense. I haven't mentioned any fight choreography from the previous battles, but this fight has it in spades, as the martial arts attacks create angles that really sell the intensity of this battle, and the rain does more to make you feel the very somber and serious tone of what is going on in this fight between brothers. The way it starts already gave me my own thoughts of how I expected the fight to conclude, with the very confident Leonardo just beating Raphael into a pulp. But it ends up subverting my expectations and has Raphael win, even getting an opportunity to kill his own brother and break his swords. He leaves even though he was so overcome by rage. Preserving the life of his loved one actually wins out in this moment. This fight is very different from any I have mentioned before, as the 3D models are definitely having their own limits. However, they explore more things that couldn't have been done in the traditional sense of animation. The rendering looks beautiful, and it still low-key has that very plastic feel like what we got in Toy Story. I mean, they kind of look like rubber dolls, to be honest, but Imagi Studio, the studio that animated it, did a beautiful job conveying their confrontation. These are the same people who made Transformers Prime, by the way, so gotta give them their props. 2007 was still a hell of a year though, because we got a lot of great cartoons like Magi Nation and Phineas and Ferb, which is... But a major animated fight that stuck with me from the year after that, in 2008, is from Spectacular Spider-Man. Now, he goes through the typical Spider-Man rite of passage. He gains the black symbiote, he becomes that dark-suited Spider-Man. However, in this case, the sentient goo takes Peter for a ride, where he meets up on the Sinister Six to give him the bone-chilling odds of fighting a 1 versus 6. And trust me, this fight was spectacular and nostalgic. It starts the way you think it would, as Venom Spidey gets his ass handed to him on a silver platter. However, the symbiote adapts. It learns and changes the way it's going for the fight, and it adopts a very important strategy for combat, where he sort of isolates each of the Sinister Six and beats them as best as he can in small windows, and he also takes care of them by using their lack of coordination against them. The fight choreography is very unique to Spider-Man, as he gets to use the environment as his playground for a fight like this. I kid you not, his agility is his superpower, and the symbiote knows that too, and it shows off that as it takes them down one by one. This fight is permanently etched into my noggin because I can't get enough of it. In 2009, we end up getting more comic book peak, with one being Hulk Versus. Now, this straight to DVD movie is where he takes on Thor and also Wolverine, but I just want to focus on the Wolverine fight mostly because of what Wolverine thinks about people who don't actually subscribe to the channel.
You smell toxic.
So, you know, subscribe. This was made by Marvel Studios and MLG Production, and they did a wonderful job conveying the ferocious nature of both characters. Hulk dominates the fight pretty early as he punches Wolverine miles away from the point of contact. Even when he transforms, we can hear that God of War kind of orchestra playing in the background. I mean, you know you are in trouble when you hear that kind of background music. I really enjoyed that. Anyways, Hulk not only knocks out Wolverine, but he breaks multiple of his bones. He chases him down through the forest, and man, I miss this version of Hulk where he is just a freaking natural disaster. He comes in, he's shattering cliffs, he's throwing crazy punches underwater, and he's tossing large boulders like they are made of nothing. Wolverine though is probably one of the best matchups to fight the Hulk, as he does really well in close quarters combat. And with this healing factor on his side, it's pretty much a battle of attrition, as he tries to get Hulk into a weakened position, almost like a stamina game. Whoever gets worn down first loses. I like the way how they play around with the perspective shots as the fight ebbs and flows into each of their favors, but mostly showing the great size disparity between the two of them. And I love that, that's great. The fight ultimately gets interrupted though at the end, and we don't really get to see a winner, but it is still definitely one of the better digitally animated pieces that got more creative with their representation of action, even giving us this iconic comic book frame in such a natural way, man. Like, I am so pleased with it. Next up is a fight that I watched countless times, and it comes from the 2009 movie of Green Lantern First Flight. Now, I remember watching this on a DVD player when I was like 9 or 8, over and over again, and it was just so amazing. And the climax of the movie, and it's truly a great fight scene from that year, as it is another one of those films that uses traditional hand-drawn style with mixed CG elements, like this yellow lantern tennis ball. I don't think I've ever seen this thing back in any other form of Green Lantern media, but hey, it's pretty cool. Seeing Hal Jordan and Sinestro face off for what was the first time for me was pretty amazing, as the fight went from a large planetary battle between asteroids with large constructs pulling moons together, huge power beams, to being a contained fist fight with impacts that lit up the sky. The fight itself though kind of represents what the power of believing in yourself can do for a hero, and how a good team behind you can make you excel. It also shows the weakness of selfishness, as the fight ends with both Hal and Sinestro in the same vulnerable position. However, Hal Jordan gets assistance while Sinestro gets his fingers broken. Yeah, that sucks. I couldn't imagine that. It also gives us one of the best Kilowog designs to date. Besides that one from the animated series, of course. That one also rocks. People on Reddit also highlight how memorable the soundtrack is, and I completely agree because that shit was heroic. It fit the Green Lantern so well, and I hope we get to see more stuff like that with what James Gunn is producing in the future. Now, we're about to dive into one of the better years of cartoons, which is the 2010s.
Coming up on Cartoon Network. Next.
Where we got bangers like Symbionic Titan, Adventure Time, and Generator Rex for the first time. I was going to use a fight from an anime, but I feel like Symbionic Titan really earned its flowers from the 2010s. Now, being Cartoon Network's main answer to the Power Rangers, or at least that's my headcanon, this show had a lot of great monster-themed clashes. However, the fight that stuck with me the most was the very small one in the cafeteria, where Lance is sitting where he doesn't belong and gets confronted by the muscle-headed jocks. Now, these guys start out by destroying his table and try to engage in a fight with him, but this short fight only ends up showing off Lance's agility and training expertise in such a cool way. It's just so cool to see a hero who doesn't really need superpowers be super efficient. Plus, we get this scene. I mean, come on, the show was created by Gendy Tartakovsky, so we can already know that it was gonna be marvelously done, especially from the action point of view. That fight scene was pretty short and quick. I mean, it is how you would expect a fight between an elite soldier and a regular meat-headed jock to play out, so it was just a really cool interaction. And I remember watching this while I was in what Americans would call middle school, but it's primary school where I'm from. I would just wish I could pull off something as cool as this in front of the girls, of course. Another cool thing to note is that this show really does use a lot of 2D and 3D animation. However, we'll get to see more of that from Hopper from the Binge Warmers. Take it away, Hopper.
My name's Hopper. I'm from the Binge Warmers, and I'm going to be talking about Symbiotic Titan today. I chose a fight from episode 6 of this one season show, The Shaman of Fear. This episode debuted in 2010, and for whatever reason, this is one of the more memorable fights in the show for me. And if you haven't seen it, the show is about Ileana, Lance, and Octus, a trio of aliens that have crash landed on Earth while attempting to escape the hostile takeover of their home planet, Galiluna. The three of them can come together to form the cyber giant Symbionic Titan to destroy monsters that may threaten them. The monster that is threatening them here is the Dark Shaman, a monster that shows the two organic members of their team their worst nightmares. This all culminates in a mech suit fight in an industrial complex. The shaman starts throwing hands in a stone giant suit, and just look at how smooth and quick these punches and blocks are. This is what immediately catches my attention. You can definitely see the Japanese influence here, whether it's the Power Ranger-esque suits or the anime-inspired fight choreography. Anyway, the shaman interrupts the fight to immobilize our heroes once again, but they do fight through it. Then they summon the Spear of Longinus to tear up this six-armed Lego man. This fight just shows off some of the more impressive technology of the show as well. Like, cartoons will often use 3D models to make technology look more uniform, and this also saves time and money. Ben 10 did this a lot with the Rust Bucket, and it works fine for transitioning or establishing shots showing a vehicle moving, but this was the first time I noticed that the 3D animation could look quick and snappy. And from what I can remember, this is pretty unique. Like, if you compare this to a show that wrapped up in 2009, Transformers Animated, that show is still using traditional 2D animation for their space robots. And I'm not saying Symbionic Titan looks better or worse, but it definitely feels different, thanks to this new style of animation. This fight also gives us some great character development. It's not just about punching and stabbing. I mean, we get insight into these characters through their fears. We understand them and their backstory a little bit better, and I'm also a huge sucker for tokusatsu and giant monster stuff. Like, look at the shaman using a train as a whip. That's so clever. Anyway, I could have probably picked any fight from the show to analyze because it is that good, and there's so many good fight scenes. But that's all for me. Thank you, Grey Matter, for letting us do this.
In the following year, it wasn't nearly as hot with new shows, but a pretty good crossover gave two fandoms a very iconic moment to remember, which is the
Ben 10, Generator X, Heroes United.
It's funny because the week leading up to this, me and my friends were beyond excited, and we couldn't wait until this banger dropped. Trust me, it delivered. Rex and Ben versus Alpha was a legendary cartoon battle. The duo started out being no match for the literal ultimate nanite, and he not only outclasses Rex, but he absorbs the Ultimatrix and becomes many times stronger. This fight isn't as much of a spectacle in fight choreography or emotional weight like shows from previous years, but it was a pretty good watch and it was great fan service, giving life to what a lot of fans, myself included, always wanted to see. Stuff like Rex and Upgrade combine or Cannonbolt being shot out of Rex's cannon was really amazing. And it kind of shows the potential that is there if these two would just end up teaming up or had a show together, like Cartoon Network or Warner Bros. Please make it happen. It also demonstrates the distinct style of Generator Rex as well. The fight ends up mixing mediums of digitally drawn animations and visual effects as well, like the portals and the rays that were shot. But what really is something that I really hoped for from that fight is that we got an upgraded Rex as a toy on the market. If you guys know if that exists, let me know in the comments. 2012 comes along with not only a new Ben 10 series in Omniverse. Remember the guy who drew Teen Titans? He did the art direction for this too. Anyways, this brings us to the first animated series for Green Lantern. It ends up following Kilowog and Hal Jordan mainly, which is freaking marvelous. It's one of the better iterations of a CG series, and it fits perfectly with the Green Lantern series. Now, it's pretty hard to pick a singular fight from this show. Honestly, it doesn't fumble, but a major fight scene for me was from the debut episode where Kilowog and Hal take on Razor and MODOK's younger brother. I don't know what this red round guy is called. What's he called? Zilius Zox. Okay, great name. Anyways, the fight is a rescue led by Kilowog and Hal in order to save a significantly less equipped Green Lantern who is in the farther reaches of space, far from the main base, which is Oa. Now, the goat-looking alien is being chased down by two Red Lanterns, Razor and MODOK the Circle, but the two swoop in and clutch it up. Now, this is a great fight dynamic that isn't just a head-on brawl, but is in sort of a game of cat and mouse, with the Red Lanterns being the cats and the Green Lanterns being the mice. This is further shown by Hal, whose ring is about to die. The two Green Lanterns play the field pretty well, which they end up rescuing the third lantern and are able to dispose of the Red Lanterns for now. The effects are smooth and beautiful, and I can really get to see the progression of 3D animation becoming less like a plastic toy version of these heroes and more into seeing these characters like flesh and blood. It's kinda sad that the Green Lantern show only got one season though, but a really great sequel to a DC project gets dropped the following year in 2013, which is Batman Returns Part 2. This not only gave us another installment in the story of an old Batman, but it gave us a better iteration of one of the greatest superhero brawls of the decade. It's a good battle that shows two once friends fighting on opposite sides of the fence, both understanding why the other is fighting and both not wanting to end the other as well. And it's a demonstration of the ingenuity and creativity of Batman. Plus, this is one of the rare installments in DC animation that has this very distinct style, to be honest. I don't think any other DC project outside of Part 1 actually replicates this kind of an art style, so that was pretty unique. I really like that. Plus, it's still hand-drawn. I kind of have a slight bias to hand-drawn animation, so it's still hand-drawn and it's a really pretty piece to be proud of, even though it had the fight's legacy tarnished by Save Martha. Anyways, 2014 was a great year for action cartoons, especially the DC animated universe. However, we aren't talking about any of those. We are going back to just raw metal, traditional Eastern magic in Naruto. Now, this fight that we're talking about is Kakashi versus Obito, a freaking banger in hand-to-hand choreography, and you can really tell the animation's knowledge about how martial arts fights would turn out. This gets an amazing parallel between the current battle and the past sparring session that both had. However, the great contrast comes from here, as both are no longer friends sparring to improve, but this is a battle to the death. I like that over the years the emotional depth of these fights start to become more pronounced in either medium. It really makes fights have more oomph. You know what I'm saying? However, the Binge Warmers has another fight from Naruto that is just as much of a banger. Take it away, Steven.
What's up, everybody? My name is Steven from the Binge Warmers. Grey Matter had us on as a little guest star just to talk about our favorite fight scenes in animation and how it shows the evolution of animation throughout the years. And mine's going to be Naruto and Sasuke versus Momoshiki. This is the fight, and it's peak Naruto fighting for me, because it starts out with hand-to-hands. This level of choreography, you don't see it a lot. I love this too because, like, this is after Naruto's show, right? So it's showing peak Naruto fighting an alien. And Sasuke is finally on his good guy arc and stuff, and he's just as powerful, you know. This guy absorbs jutsus and stuff, so you can't use jutsus on him. So it's got to be all physical. See, so he's throwing Rasen Shuriken, the guy's like, okay, fine. Psych, bitch, it's me, Sasuke. But then Sasuke can switch with people. But I love the evolution, like I was saying. It starts hand-to-hand, but then everyone wants the big fight. It just shows where we started with Naruto way back. Like, there's some bits where you can see the animation is used over and over and over again, the same like 3 frames, and now we've got fights like this. But this is my fight. If anyone asks me my favorite anime fight, it's Naruto and Sasuke versus Momoshiki, just because it's so sick. So I think that wraps up our 2 segments. Thank you, Grey Banner, for having us on your episode.
Thank you, guys. If y'all haven't subscribed to them, their channel info is in the description.
Coming up next, more What's New, Scooby-Doo on Cartoon Network.
2016, we venture back into the realm of 3D animation with Kung Fu Panda 3. And man, we can really see the incredible growth that we have seen in earlier iterations of the medium being used. He fights Kai, not Senat, but the bull, wildebeest, or bison. I don't know what kind of animal this thing is. Probably an ox, who has the ability to turn his opponents into jade sculptures. This fight had Kai in an overwhelming advantage over Po, until he receives some chi from his friends and family, and the hidden clan of pandas, which is cool. I thought Po was the last panda, apparently he's not. This unlocks a new form for him that changes him from being overpowered by green hues into being golden bright lights. I really love this, even though it becomes less of a martial arts battle now and more of a full-on chi blast, chi Susanoo spectacle. I mean, which in my opinion kind of costs a bit of the charm of the fight, but I digress, it was still pretty cool to see. In 2017, we got the eventual conclusion of one of my favorite early 2000s cartoons, which is Samurai Jack, with the final season of the show debuting on Adult Swim. So because of that, it had a crazy change in art style and art direction and also tone. Now, the show from its inception had a painterly style in it, and it maintains this in season 5, which, come on, it's one of the most immaculate art styles to see in an animated action cartoon. It's really unique. Jack, on the other hand, ends up facing a battle against the 7 daughters of Aku in a snowy forest, which seems pretty plain. I mean, a battle in the snow is pretty basic, right? But the art direction took a huge turn because they play around with the contrast so freaking well, as the background became completely white, contrasting so well against the black of the Aku soldiers, and Jack himself with these kind of grayish flesh tones right in between the two colors. It was genuinely amazing. The fight was pretty one-sided though, as it shows a huge gap of experience and training between Jack and the children of Aku. Even though since they were born they have been trained to kill the samurai, they were simply no match for him. Even though he had no sword, he still ended up slaughtering them. He didn't really want to kill them, he offered them an opportunity to leave, but he ends up killing them pretty quickly regardless. This though is something that I actually love, that this hero has the resolve to end the life of those who are very evil ninjas, but it is what it is. Now in 2018, it's a very pivotal year for animation in general, with one of the most important trendsetters debuting in this year, which is Into the Spider-Verse. Now, I didn't really think much of the show when it just came out or based on the ads that I would see on TV, but when I actually watched it, I was really blown away, as their incorporation of the literal opposite of what we have been seeing for the past few years in animation, with a majority of hand-drawn pieces being complemented by 3D assets. We had a 3D world being complemented by 2D digital art, like with the colors and comic book panel references. It all bloomed really in the final battle of the show, where the Spider League take on Kingpin and his cronies. This was one of the better Spider-Man battles that could incorporate fast-paced movement and agility along with the individuality of each spider person in combat, and I loved it. Especially after all the spiders went back to their home dimension and how Miles took on and overcame Kingpin. It was really epic. It's probably one of the top 5 fight scenes from animated movies of that decade. Definitely changed the outlook of the medium of 3D going forward for everyone. And some of the quotes from the fight as well was really good, because it was really like a full circle moment and like a completion of Miles' character arc. 2018 gave us a pretty good continuation of what has become a classic cartoon nowadays, which is Steven Universe, but you know, Steven Universe the movie. Now, beyond just being a great continuation of a very well wrapped Steven Universe, it ended up incorporating one of Pink Diamond's other loose ends. That's Steven's mother, by the way, if you don't know. Anyways, the loose end ends up being this funny looking court jester was abandoned for 6,000 years by Pink Diamond, and now she wants revenge on Steven. The battle follows a pretty solid theme of forgiveness and moving on, and change, centered around Spinel's bitterness. It's one of the few fights that also got to explore the Toon Force aspect of the battle without being Looney Tunes or something. That kind of style fits so well within the Steven Universe aesthetic, especially since these guys are not known for staying on model when they're doing animations. But it was really creative, and I really enjoyed the exaggerated motions, decisive slashes and blows from Spinel, and the great contrasting rays of light and color from Steven. You can just see takes a lot of inspiration from larger planetary scaled fights in anime anime. However, these don't get nearly as out of hand or over the top. A lot of anime influences too, as they're not scared to show some really interesting camera moves and rotations mid-battle. They really gave us a 3D fight in 2D, pretty much. You can't tell me there is no CG in this. We can see some more of these anime influences in 2 banger fights from the year of the lockdown in anime like JJK.
More action, less filler.
DBZ Kai is coming up next.
When it first blasted onto the scene, 2 fights really stood out to me, and that is the Nobara and Yuji versus the Cursed Wombs and Gojo versus Jogo. Both fights explore an aspect of battle that you don't get to see very often, but let's start with the Gojo fight. This fight fits really well into the fly swatter archetype, where one character is significantly stronger than the other, and it shows as Gojo beats the bricks off of the volcano head. It's a very creative fight that mixes the CG and hand-drawn aspects of animation, and it does that nearly seamlessly. With the visual effects layered on top of it, it's just literally perfection. It gives the audience a good frame of reference as well for what the peak of this show's magic system looks like, and to be honest, it was a genius move of showing that off pretty early. Kind of lets us know what the main characters have to live up to. Nobara and Yuji versus the Cursed Wombs complement that fight though, because they kind of build on this new rise of excellent camera movements and creative shots to build on basically 4 unique combat styles in this one too. This entire show was handled by the legendary animation studio MAPPA, and they have a way of adapting manga panels in such a way that it's beyond being one-to-one, as they make it completely transformative. They blend mediums so well too that all 3 things, the VFX, the drawings and CG, feel very cohesive, and I love it. 2021 though was a feast, because on one hand we got a League of Legends series, and on the other hand we got the first season of Invincible. It's pretty hard to pick which one I want to talk about, so I'll save Invincible for when we hit 2025. Arcane was on another level for 3D animation, and it shows a crazy progression of how rendering has evolved over the past 15 years. And that whole blended medium thing didn't just stop at SpiderVerse. A fight that really exemplifies this the best is Powder or Jinx versus Echo on the bridge. Now after Jinx bombs the bridge, taking the lives of many an innocent and not so innocent, she faces off with her old friend Echo. It plays a pretty painterly story of 2 children playing a simple paintball fight, and the stylistic choice, it's magnificent. It had a lower frame rate than the typical animation, which gave it an opportunity to give us a story of what was. Still, we get to see the action play out, going from a past where Powder tags Echo with a paintball and wins, to where Echo is able to read her attacks in real time and beat her. This kind of parallel in this very short battle reminds me of the Naruto fight with Kakashi versus Obito. It had a lot of those elements where, you know, 2 stories are converging, and I really loved it. How a platonic love would really blossom into becoming a vile hatred. It really tugs at the heartstrings. The studio that worked on Arcane is a French studio named Fortiche, who would normally specialize in making animated music videos, but this show that they took on made leaps for animation and fight scenes. But we still have a lot more bangers in 2022, as a major one for me was the movie Dragon Ball Superhero. This movie really caught on to the trend of the 3D blended with 2D elements, kinda made it seem like it was a new industry standard, and the fights show it off as it makes it feels like a modern, polished take on Dragon Ball. Any scene with Gohan was amazing, but the fight that stood out to me the most was the battle against the Gammas and Gohan, as he went through all of his forms and showed us amazing combat sequences that is to be expected of a 40-year-old franchise. Angles, the camera movements did not slack, and the pacing is great, not to mention the fight choreography. Even though this is Dragon Ball Z, which is pretty much branded as just a big light show of huge superpowered rays, it just had immaculate fight choreography. It's easily a show that can become intergalactic like that, but it did stay rooted in the martial art for this flick, and I really appreciated it. Which sort of reminds me of, you know, prime Dragon Ball Z like the Cell Saga. Another battle though that was not so hands-on comes from Jujutsu Kaisen in 2023 with Sukuna versus Mahoraga. This fight ends up being another flex of the upper limit limits of this show's magic system. I enjoy high stakes, large scale battles like this because as the fight goes on, both of the ops start to ramp up in scale of their attacks each time, going from a small streetway battle to causing a literal nuclear detonation in the city of Shibuya. This fight was excellently animated though, because the team at MAPPA know when to throw out the rigid character models and get experimental with these expressions in combat. And we can see this as they go from various styles and ways to convey Sukuna's slashes, and also how this big white statue becomes larger and larger after each time it gets hit. Even the final blow, I'm not sure if they actually did this in the same softwares because it looks like it would pass for something that isn't from this show. The evolution of the hand-drawn medium has really come a very far way as the limits have been pushed harder and harder. This kind of influence is pretty clear back over in the West in 2024 as the anime techniques start to slip out in other cartoons like Invincible Fight Girl. But I'm not here to talk about that show because she deserves a video of her own. The main thing I want to talk about is XMen 97, namely the fight between Wolverine and Nightcrawler versus the Sentinels. Now this battle is a treat, a demonstration of two different styles of combat and combat preferences, as both use sharp metal to take down their opponents, however in such a very different way, as Wolverine is very wild, feral and vicious, while Nightcrawler is nearly elegant, calculated and very precise with his katana. We also get a really immaculate perspective shot of what it feels like being teleported by Nightcrawler, so that was pretty cool. This show ends up starting to blend the mediums though even more, and it sort of blurs the line between CG, hand-drawn and VFX. And I mean that is really saying something because we're coming from a time where it's either medium as the main dish and the other medium as secondary or the fries or something on the side, you know? But them becoming a complete package by 2024 is insane. 2025 doubles down on that, starting the year off with the third season of Invincible. For the most part it had lackluster animations until we hit the final battle of the final episode, which pulled out all the stops. Again, with the blended medium, it makes certain effects better and easier and just straight up more effective. We started getting more creative perspectives, camera angles and even character expressions, which I want to talk about more in our next piece from 2025. But this fight in every way feels like a large scale battle, but even more immersive as it doesn't quite make you feel like a bystander. It more puts you into the actual fight like you're there, and I love that. You can really feel the stakes that Mark is grappling with as well, because he is literally getting his ass kicked, and if he loses, that's it for Earth. Now the weight of the planet being in a balance isn't some brand new phenomenon, but the fact that Mark is the true final line of defense feels very real and very scary, especially the fact that he is no match for Conquest. Another banger that came out literally last week is Kpop Demon Hunters. Now at this point animation has superseded what we had 20 years ago, and I want to talk about the opening fight scene where we get introduced to the Huntrix group. The battle doubles as a music video, and they do not shy away from exploring the most immersive and creative camera angles. The pacing of this fight is amazing, as it shows that these girls are expert fighters who are taking down their targets in the swiftest way possible. Not so swift for you to not keep up, you know? It really just tells you that, hey, focus on these three girls and you'll be fine. Before I even start to gush about the expressions, take a look at this scene here that really encapsulates what I'm talking about with the camera movement. Oh my god! Wow! It almost feels like this stuff is hand-drawn. The way they can execute on these swift two-frame motions, it's actually amazing. And I like the creative use of the objects on board the plane as well before they end up using their own conjured weapons. It really shows that these girls are pretty resourceful, and I mean using your surroundings to your advantage is like a huge battle trope that I really enjoy. I mean, I probably have to blame Jackie Chan for that. It's truly an amazing blend of everything we have seen in the past 20 years, and the faces change and are molded like you're watching anime or some sort of stop motion. It's just a total freaking banger. They also do a thing that I have seen more and more, which is maintain character idiosyncrasies or just the uniqueness of each character through subtleties in the animation during combat, outside of combat. I love it, and it kind of gives these characters a flavor of being very real. But that's just a Galvan's thoughts on 20 years of fight scenes. Thank you for watching. The Omnitrix exposes alien technology. Of course, it's one of the most unique devices in all of fiction, but what it reveals about everything else is truly special.